Alrighty, welcome to Timely Topics. Today's conversation is on strongman politics, the rise of authoritarian leaders in democracies. So the first kind of thing to figure out is, what is a strongman leader? So here you go, skip.
Thank you.
So kind of according to political scientists and everything, a strongman leader is an authoritarian figure who consolidates personal power while cloaking their role in the appearance of democracy. Unlike traditional dictators who seize power through force or undemocratic means, strongmen often come to power through fair and free elections, only later to dismantle the very democratic institutions that enabled their rise. Here you go, Greg. So elected strongmen are those who come to power for the first time in a fair and free election, but then subsequently decide to do things to undermine the government and the way democracy is run. Such leaders ought to portray themselves as the embodiment of the people, concentrate the functions of the state in their person, and weaken checks and balances to constrain their authority. So it often becomes more of a cult of personality. I'm the kind of the leader. The authority of the state's in me, not just the party or the other functions of government. I am the kind of end-all, be-all decider. I'm the one who can ultimately fix the problem, and only I can ultimately fix whatever problem they say they are going to fix. So, strongman versus dictator, what's the difference? While a dictator typically rises through undemocratic means, military coups, one-party rule, etc., an elected strongman wins office through legitimate democratic processes. The danger arises when that strongman begins to erode democratic norms from within, changing laws, stifling opposition, undermining elections. As expert Rachel Wright notes, it could go all the way to the point where they undermine democracy so much that it collapses, or there are no longer fair and free elections. So usually strongman leaders, they're elected, they get in fair and right. That's the difference between them and a dictator. And usually a strongman leader will work within, here you go, Jane, will work within the structure of government, but push the envelope more and more and more, stifle opposition, start cutting down on free press, changing little election laws here and there to ensure they get to stay in power. It doesn't happen all in one swift movement. So we'll look at some historical and modern examples. Strongman leaders are not new. 20th century figures like Fernando Marcos, Philippines, Alberto Fujimori, Peru, and Hugo Chavez paved the way. These are ones that, general political scientists would say are strongman leaders. Today we see similar patterns. And I'm not going to say each one of these is a strongman leader, but some of the patterns that are quintessential as strongmen. In Russia, Putin has imprisoned political foes based on drummed-up charges, accusations of assassinations. Observers opine that he's so used to getting his way that no one could discourage him from invading Ukraine. He's kind of changed the rules, where at one point he was kind of prime minister, then he had to become president, then he could be prime minister again, but now he just kind of stays in power, so changing kind of the rules and the conventions to stay in power. Then you have in Turkey, Erdogan has issued presidential decrees to give him virtually unlimited, unchecked control over the levers of government. He's also jailed journalists and promoted patronage politics. If you recall, last spring, he jailed his main political opponent, the mayor of Istanbul, and many of his kind of team. And that's what all the big protests in Turkey were about last year. So kind of claiming, these people have corruption or something, we'll put them in jail. Others have said he's kind of repressed media and other things. In Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro has restricted access to government information, attacked the Supreme Court, supported policies that undermine the rights of women and the disabled. He basically claimed that there was electoral fraud in the 2022 October elections, undercutting people's faith in the process and setting the stage for a protest in case he lost. Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte launched a war on drugs, which resulted in thousands of extrajudicial killings. Rather than resorting to the old authoritarian tactic of censorship, he branded a news site that was critical of him as fake news and openly admits to closing down a TV network that got on his bad side. So Duterte, instead of, in the past, when strongman leaders would just kind of cut off media, he would just label it fake news, discredit it, but then eventually he did also shut one down that he didn't like. In India, under Modi, India passed a controversial citizenship law seen as discriminatory against Muslims. Modi also granted government agencies the power to monitor all computers in the country. In Saudi Arabia, the leaders cracked down on dissenters and liberals such as women's rights advocates, arrested some of the country's richest people allegedly for corruption. Many are afraid to speak up against him. In Hungary, Orban became Prime Minister of Hungary, a member of the EU. Since then, he has subtly eroded the country's independent institutions as he brought the courts, media, civil service, universities, and cultural institutions under the control of his party. So he's kind of been siding more with Putin, again, kind of taking on more of those characteristics. So these leaders vary in ideology, geography, and strategy, but share a few common traits of nationalism, contempt for opposition, undermining of institutions, and centralized control of power. Some of these are characteristics. It's one of those things that you can have one, but not all, and not be a strongman leader, or you don't have to always have them all, but these are some of the characteristics that typically are held by these strongman leaders. If you just really hate your opposition party, really demonize them, call them enemies, are outright disdainful about them, that's one of the main characteristics. When you start undermining institutions so people don't trust them as much, that have long been institutions, cultural, academic, scientific, whatever, of your nation, that's one. If you're centralizing control of power, especially in your person. So there's three main P's of the modern strongman. The first is populism. Strongmen cultivate a cult of personality. They often present themselves as relatable men of the people while paradoxically displaying hyper-masculine toughness. They exploit nostalgia and nationalism like Putin's promise to restore Russian greatness. They will often play the victim as well. For example, Italy's Silvio Berlusconi claimed he was a victim of a witch hunt, all these charges against him. So often they'll play like, I'm really strong, hyper-masculine, but I'm also a victim. Trying to kind of play all those things. They're the ones that can fix the nation. Often with populism, trying to kind of bring back a nostalgia for something that never actually was, people imagine was, and desire to have again, even if that never existed in the first place. The second is polarization. They will stoke the us versus them divisions. They're not looking to bring people together. They are looking to kind of create these challenges. Political opposition is demonized as treasonous or dangerous. Moderation vanishes. Consensus politics breaks down. They will thrive on creating more of the polarization. And that's just the people in their system, the influencers, are going to stoke those flames, create more of the division, try to get people more angry, try to have more radical things, because that destabilizes, and the destabilization will help, because then they can say, oh, there's dangerous destabilization, I need to have a firmer hand, I can send in troops to take care of this newspaper, take care of these aggressors, like we saw this morning in American Midnight with what Wilson did, sending National Guard to Butte, Montana, being able to arrest people at whim. Those things can happen when you can have destabilization, but first you got to destabilize. So rile people up more, and then be able to separate and have more power over them. Then also the last one is post-truth politics. Strongmen exploit disinformation, social media manipulation, and historical revisionism to control public perception. As Imelda Marcos once said, perception is real, but the truth is not. So trying to major misinformation campaigns. If you can just flood everything with misinformation, no one knows who to trust anymore. And you can kind of keep people on their heels. In countries like the Philippines, historical whitewashing helped Ferdinand Marcos Jr. win the presidency in 2022, marking a return of strongman rule through democratic elections. So trying to kind of revise history, take out the bad things about you or bad things about a country, or make certain things seem not so bad, just revisionist history, trying to kind of change the narrative in the story. So how strongmen transform political parties. Traditional democratic parties are ideological or programmatic in nature, built on shared beliefs, a shared platform. But strongmen often create or dominate personal parties that exist solely to elevate their images and suppress internal dissent. Sometimes they may start that party, sometimes they'll rise through a party and eventually transform that party more into the personal party than it used to be. And that's happened like in Hungary with Viktor Orban. So these parties lack internal checks. Elites are incentivized not to challenge the leader because the leader controls nominations, resources, and promotions. So the leader can say, well, if you don't get on board with me, I'm going to go for somebody else to take your seat, to take your position, fire you, whatever. Elites' careers are tied to personal loyalty, not the party brand or ideology. So there's often these loyalty tests with the strongman leaders. Like, you have to basically be loyal to me, my brand, or you're not going to have a job anymore. I'm going to make your life difficult. It's not about the party and the ideology. It's about the personal support. So it's kind of like in church sometimes, like, who is the church, right? Who is the church? The people, right? So Daily Presbyterian Church exists outside any one leader. Pastors come and go. The church basically remains because you all come together because you have a shared belief, shared goals, vision. It's not my vision. It's not Dick House's vision or anything that creates the church. Now, there are other churches that are built solely on the personality of one person. That can be sometimes a denominational church like a Presbyterian, but often it's non-denominational church where somebody kind of starts a church. It's all built up around that person. They are the church. Looking at like Mars Hill, a church that was out in Seattle with Mark Driscoll. Some of these like Hillsong type churches, was one person. So much so that the churches take out key man insurance policies on them because they're sure, like, if this person died or was sick or went to jail for stuff, the church will crumble because it's based on them, not really a shared belief or community. And you see that happen with a lot of churches when the pastor gets in trouble, which they often do, because again, there's no checks and balances on them. The church just crumbles because it's built on a person, not on a shared belief. So that's what happens with these political parties too. If it's built on one person, if something happens to that person, often they will crumble. It's all built around a person, not shared beliefs and community. So why do people elect these strongmen then if they erode democracy, do all this stuff? Well, one is often social economic inequality. In countries with large wealth gaps, voters may feel abandoned by traditional elites and turn to strongmen as agents of change. Their hardline promises offer hope to people who feel the system is broken. That happened yesterday in Czech Republic. Billionaire populist was elected who is aligned more with Hungary and Viktor Orban and Putin with Russia over the EU and Ukraine. Whether he'll become a strongman leader, I don't know. But he kind of used the rise of inflation, the bad economy, the situation with Ukraine, and sending all this money and resources there, the influx of immigrants and refugees, to say, hey, the system's broken, destabilized. I'm going to bring it back, make it about Czechia. I'm the one to fix it. So we'll see how that unfolds. The other is fear of change. Periods of social progress, racial, gender equality, labor unions, things like that can provoke backlash. Strongmen exploit these fears by promising to restore a perceived lost order. Ruth Ben Guy notes that the rise of strongmen often follows progressive shifts in society. We saw that with Wilson this morning with American Midnight. You had all these kind of rising of labor unions and progressive policies that had like the creation of the FDA, all this stuff. You had the backlash, and then you had the repression. So some people are like, this is a weird new world we live in. Women can vote or something. We want to go back to some other order. We have a rise of immigrants, more religious plurality. We want to just be a Christian nation. It's only Charlie Kirk, we talked about last week, said we're only good if we can be a Christian nation. He's one of those that really focused on the polarization politics, right? So people might like what he said, didn't, but anyone can agree he focused on polarizing, saying things that would grab headlines, draw attention, divide further. And he was one that he talked about going back to this way when it's just saving Western civilization, having just Christianity. So again, that's pulling this fear of change. Hey, we want to go back to this thing that really wasn't ever there, but we pretend like it was. Crises like COVID-19 pandemic also provide opportunities for strongmen to justify power grabs under the guise of protecting public health and safety. Any kind of crisis, real or manufactured. So when there's real things, wars, that can be a time to cement power, kind of overstep civil liberties. You can say assassinations, or what we'll see around the world when people are more violent protests. We can say, you see, we're destabilized. We got to come in. That's what Hitler did after the burning of the Reichstag. There's these dangerous actors in our country. We better shut them down. Give me all the power. I'm the only one who's strong enough to protect you all. So fears of insecurity, fear of danger, lets people see these liberties and freedoms to a strongman leader. So how do they actually erode democracy? They don't declare martial law to destroy democracy. They don't often come in with a coup. It's not fast. They erode it through incremental steps. One is undermine judicial independence. When you start seeing, when a leader starts criticizing the justice system as, it's unfair, we got to bring in new people, this is all too political, that's often a sign. When you undermine judicial independence, try to put all your own people in and put pressure on them to rule the way you want them to rule. That's a sign. Controlling and intimidating the media. When you start saying who can and can't be on the news. When you are trying to cancel certain shows. When you're disrupting the media, labeling things as not real or fake news, as Duterte did in the Philippines. That's one of the steps strongmen typically take. We saw it with Wilson and his postmaster general person saying, hey, these newspapers that disagree with us, you can't send them through the mail, so they effectively shut them down. So, again, not new. Dismissing civil servants and judges. When you start getting rid of people that you don't like for any way you can think of, and saying we don't like this, what they tried to do with the Department of Labor guy Post during Wilson's administration, they weren't able to get rid of him. We see that happening around the world. If you can get rid of all these civil servants, judges, find reasons, generals that aren't loyal to you, more people get rid of, you can put all your own people in. That's what Hitler and the Nazis did in Germany early on. It's one of those things people don't often think about as much, but early on, when Hitler rose to power, they wiped out the civil service of anyone Jewish and had more left-leaning ties. That these weren't supposed to be political offices, but they got rid of them all, put in people from the Nazi party. So it didn't seem shocking. It was one of the steps they took. Rigging elections through legal loopholes, creating new rules, creating new laws, finding ways to skirt to say you can't vote or whatever, that's a way. Spreading propaganda and disinformation. We saw Wilson's team did that a lot. When you have Russian bots going through, Putin uses all that. And then using personal loyalty to override institutional norms. Having these loyalty tests. Are you going to be loyal to me or to the institution? Are you going to be loyal to me or whatever constitution the country has? In Turkey, for example, Erdogan purged over 50,000 civil servants and shuttered media outlets after a failed 2016 coup. In China, Xi Jinping removed presidential term limits and declared that China must reject Western constitutionalism. It's like, China needs to be our own thing. Let's not be like the West, so I'll just stay in power for the good of everybody. Putin's done the same thing. So we start saying, hey, I really need to stay in power longer than I'm supposed to for the good of the nation. That's another sign. So organizations like Freedom House report a global decline in democratic standards, often led by elected leaders. In India, the world's largest democracy, critics argue that under Modi's leadership, institutions have been weakened and laws passed to discriminate against minorities. Even leaders like AMLO in Mexico and Netanyahu in Israel, once seen as democratic reformers, are now accused of democratic backsliding. An unlimited numerical democracy is a collective strongman regime. In this digital age, the surveillance capabilities pioneered by democracies themselves are now being used by strongmen to monitor citizens, suppress dissent, and centralize control. So in conclusion, the modern strongman is not a caricature of a tyrant. He is a product of democratic decay. He rises with the people's votes only to dismantle the very systems that enabled his power. He promises order, greatness, and unity, but delivers fear, division, and control. So to defend democracy is essential to, 1, recognize the signs of authoritarian creep early, strengthen independent institutions and media, educate citizens on civic responsibility and history, and ensure political parties serve democratic goals, not personal power. History has shown that democracy is not always destroyed by tanks. It can die by 1,000 legal cuts delivered by a leader elected to protect it. So that's some basics on Strongman stuff. Somebody asked this morning like where all the sources were. I can email that to you. I took a bunch of different kind of like articles, classes, some of these different political science think tanks, put it all together. And that's if you didn't get a sheet, I have them here. Questions, comments, strong remarks? All righty, thank you very much. We won't have time on the topic. Oh, Pam, you have a question.
So, are there examples of, I guess, beyond Hitler, example that is only ended by war, other strongman governments that were overcome by democratic means?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at different times, people have eventually been kind of voted out of office around the world. I guess like in... I don't have all my political history stuff down, but like some of these places, like is it Brazil that Bolsonaro is now out? But you know, so sometimes you can kick people out. Sometimes they stay in for a long time. But again, it's a cult of personality. So when they can't do it anymore, somebody else comes around. It's not always a long-lasting regime thing. So yeah, there are examples of that, and you can have tendencies of a strongman, but not go all the way. Like I think you can classify Wilson in a lot of ways as a strongman, even though he didn't completely erode democracy, so there wouldn't be free and fair elections, but he definitely limited dissent and everything. I don't think he was trying to set himself up as the supreme leader of his party. So there were aspects of it, but not, he was like strongman light, so to speak. I tried to find examples of like strongmen that might have been needed for a time. And like somebody this morning asked about Churchill. Like Churchill would be more of a strong leader, but always pretty much worked within the democratic norms, easily left office at this time. So there's a difference between being an aggressive, strong leader and being a full-on like strongman. A strongman wants to erode democracy and put all the power of the state in his person. So I think we can there's a difference between strong leader, because sometimes situations call for a heavy-handed strong leader. It doesn't mean they're a strong man who's trying to dismantle democracy. And different times call for different kinds of leadership, just like different conflicts call for different styles of conflict management. Yes, Claudia.
I think it's interesting in Nicaragua because Ortega was fighting against their previous dictator, and he was a freedom fighter, and now he's the dictator.
That often happens a lot too. If you ever read, the whole like Hunger Games trilogy series thing, at the end, the person who's like fighting against the really bad empire basically takes it so they can become the evil bad empire too. That often happens in history. They might be seeing it in Syria now as well. All right, thank you all very much. See you. No more tiny topics until November, because we have the congregational meeting next week. Then I'll be in Pakistan and Turkey on that trip. So, all righty, thank you.